Welcome to our next installment of our Future Focus series. Today's guest is David Pettifor. He is a senior research programmer for the University of Notre Dame. This kind of shows us some insight to the pathway of information technology. Please note that guests of our Zoom webinar today will have view-only capabilities and do not have access to video or audio. Please use the chat feature to ask any questions that you may have of the guests today, and I will monitor and ensure that answers are gathered, and this session will be recorded. Hello, Nathan. Thank you for posting that in the chat. So, David, we're so excited to have you with us today as a part of our Future Focus series and sharing insight to a day in the life of what you do. So to get started, can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Notre Dame and kind of your role within that?
Yeah, so I work for a department at Notre Dame. We're called the Center for Research Computing. Our primary goal at this department is to help aid researchers and scientists in anything that's computationally intense. And what that means is when a researcher or a professor has a project that they need help with either building a database or building a web portal to collect data, or maybe they have a bunch of data already from their research project and they need to visualize that, they can bring that to us. So we're super flexible, but a lot of what we do is web-based. So we do a lot of web programming and help. Some of these projects are quite large in terms of dollars and grants and time. So some of the projects that I'm currently on are over 5 years running of a research project where it's data collection and then analysis and reporting and showing results on charts and web pages and being able to query these and pull data out and all this kind of stuff. And then the researchers can use that data and write papers and publications and further the science and research in their field.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, because you think about it, we use data in a lot of what we do. I know in education we do as well. And without data, sometimes decisions and things can't be made because they have to see the proof of the data. Mm-hmm. So to know that you're helping to query all that, get it together and make it so then we can share it out in a way that's not just a bunch of numbers and everything on a on a screen that looks really confusing. There are people that do that. So let's think back to when you were 15, 16, 17 years old, middle school, high school. Did you ever think that you would be doing this kind of career? And did you ever think that you would be working in this kind of capacity for a major university?
Right. So absolutely not. When I was, honestly, when I was in middle school, we were just now starting to get free email accounts. So much has changed since then. But I really started getting into programming in 7th grade. It was a summer computer camp at a local university here in Indiana. And we spent a week just learning HTML, and that's all we really learned. And so that was my first introduction to programming. From there, I kind of did some side stuff on my own in terms of Unix shell scripting and really boring stuff like that, but really low level things that gave me a good foundation. But that was always, to me, that was always more of a hobby. What I actually really wanted to do was go into meteorology. And that was my goal throughout most of high school. That was what my end goal was to apply to a good university that could get me a degree in meteorology, so that I could help with weather prediction software and all that kind of stuff. However, things change. And in high school, I was attending a local area career center where I started picking up some more IT kinds of things. I got my A+ certification in high school. I did some Cisco network training. I did 3 of the 4 semesters there, but I never completed the Cisco network training to where I got my my certification from Cisco. but to me, that was more of just a plan B, more of a backup. What I ended up doing my senior year in high school, I applied to Valparaiso University, and they have had a really good meteorology program there. And I applied. That was the only college I applied to, because I was so sure this is what I wanted to do. I had done a campus visit, and then in June I got the letter back saying that they wouldn't accept me, mostly because my grades were not good enough in high school. So my GPA was just too low. And they told me that I needed to take 12 credit hours at another institution, and keeping my GPA at a 3.5 or higher, and then they would reevaluate my application. So in a panic mode, really, in a panic state, I submitted another application to Indiana University here in South Bend, which was very late. It was like July, and classes start in August. And I applied for the computer science program there, and they accepted me. And so I thought, I'll just do computer science. It'll still kind of get me close to what I wanted to do with meteorology and programming. And maybe I'll reevaluate and think if I want to switch over to Valpo at a later time, that I could do that. But as I was going through my courses, I really fell in love with programming even more, and found that I had kind of a knack for it. And so I stuck with it, and continued on. And I ended up getting my bachelor's degree at IUSB.
Wow. And I love what you shared about that path to get there, right? Because, you talked about career tech education. We have a pretty awesome career tech center here in Muskegon that has an IT program.
Mm-hmm.
And so really those early experiences to kind of try something on and see where it might fit for you. And if it doesn't, no harm, no foul, right?
Right. Yep.
But if it does, you can get some early certifications and kind of take that first step. And I love that you talked about early experiences in seventh grade and those after school or summer programs to kind of try things on. That's a really great time in middle school to really kind of take some deeper dives and start learning what that may be. And then, like you said, and I'll be honest, I know a lot of kids that go through this. Life just kind of happens and you have a plan, and life sometimes kind of says, whoops,
Yeah. Yep.
plan B. And so,
Right.
I like how you said, have that plan B, because you don't know where that might lead you. And even though meteorology was your first kind of go-to, that involves IT and data and things that you're looking at. So you really haven't ventured too far from that. It's just maybe the subject matter in
Right.
some ways.
Right.
So I really like looking at it like that way. That's just so awesome. Um, so tell us about, your time in college when you were, okay, I want to get something close to meteorology, something where like, what was it in some of the courses that you were taking that said, whoa, I really am falling in love with programming and digging into all this data and research?
Yeah. So it was maybe my third year in college. So I completed in 5 years. It took me an extra year to get my 4 year, what they call a 4-year degree, which is perfectly fine.
Yep.
And it was maybe my third, maybe my fourth year, somewhere around there. I spoke with my guidance counselor there, or my advisor, I guess. And he gave me some really good advice in terms of programming, at least in the computer science field at that time. He said, if you want to get a good job, you need to either have one of two specialties, because of the demand that was at the time. And at the time, that was either databases or networking. And he said, so you need to choose one of those to focus your electives on. So in college, you can take a certain number of electives to really fine tune some of those skills. And so I decided to go with databases. And as I was getting into databases, it really felt natural to me. And I was picking it up really quickly. And I did pretty well in the first database course that I took. So much so that my second elective, I decided to take the graduate level database course at IUSB, and I did really, really well in that class too.
So
And so,
easy to find that it's a natural fit for you when it comes easy like that. Yeah, that's
yep,
usually a strong indicator. Awesome.
yep. Yep, and I continued to do other things too on the side. I applied for a tutoring job at IUSB, so I was the computer science tutor for 2 years at least. And then I did other tutoring on the side, kind of freelance tutoring for not only IUSB students, but like Ivy Tech students too. I was having students from Ivy Tech come and want some help with some of their computer science coursework, which was very similar to what we were teaching at IUSB. So it lined up really nicely. And so this whole concept of mentoring and teaching alongside with databases that really pulled me away from, maybe I don't want to do meteorology. Maybe staying in the computer science field is really what I'd like to do. So.
That's great to hear that those courses kind of led you there. And like you said, when you found success in taking a course, and then again additional success in taking what a graduate level course, and you think, ooh, that'd be super hard, and you did really well. Sometimes those are great opportunities for you to say, yep, this is the path that you need to follow. You talked about credentials as well. You have a bachelor's degree, but you talked about making sure you have a specialty. And even when you were at the Career Tech Center, you talked about some initial credentials. Tell us a little bit more about those, what those stand for, what those allow you to do within your field.
Yeah. So at the Career Center where I was doing the A+ certification, that's a certification basically saying you know what you're doing with hardware. And you can easily build a computer, you can put the right software on it, you can identify the different parts. And again, this was oh geez, like 15 years ago, and so much has changed since then. So I obviously have not been
True.
keeping up on it. But it is something that is vastly different. With the CCNA, the Cisco Certified Network Administrator, that coursework would allow you to be certified to work on networks with Cisco equipment, and to be a network administrator, basically. And so a lot of places require a big network to communicate their computers and their desktop phones and all this kind of stuff, and to servers and all this. And so a CCNA certification would allow you to work on that. And so that was, I guess, more of a plan C. And that alone, knowing that I had 3 of the 4 courses already done for my CCNA, was a hard decision when my advisor told me you need to either do networking or databases. Because I thought, if I go networking, I already have 3 of the 4 courses done. But the time that I spent my junior and senior year in high school, I really did not enjoy it very much, doing the networking stuff, which is what pivoted me into thinking, well, maybe databases would be more fun, or maybe it'd be a little bit easier for me to grasp. And it turns out that was the case, fortunately.
Right, exactly. And so for somebody to, if they're going into computer science and they're like, ooh, I want to do something with computer science, is there those beginning certifications that can get them in the door and they can work their way up? Or does everybody pretty much need an associate's or bachelor's to really get to like what you're doing, or other aspects of,
Yeah.
like you were talking, networks or things like that?
Right. Yeah. So the skill sets that I picked up from the Career Center between the A+ certification and the CCNA didn't necessarily help with computer programming. So those are more the IT focused, where computer programming is more on the computer science side. And
Got
so
it.
even though they're kind of lumped together as technical fields, that is where they kind of split off, where you'll have more of a hardware administrative side versus programming that hardware.
Yep.
And so yeah, that going into computer science, it depends on where you work, because there's still this battle of different technology stacks and programming languages that certain companies in the industry will prefer,
Mm,
And to name kind of the top three, it would be anything .NET, so the Microsoft stack, so ASP.NET or yeah, anything in the .NET framework. Java is a big one,
mhm,
and then Python is the other one.
okay.
So those are the three that companies, when you're looking for a job, will look for in terms of experience. Now, when you go to college and they start teaching you courses, depending on the university you go to, they'll be teaching fundamentals of programming using one of those three. Um,
Okay.
but the things that you pick up, no matter which one they go with, you should be able to translate and apply to the other two. So
Okay.
things like object-oriented programming and how computers think and computer architecture and this kind of thing. So
That's helpful to know. Like if somebody, like you said, depending on where they go to school, if they have knowledge of one, they can pivot into the other two directions easily enough. Because
yep.
sometimes, as you know, we go off and go to college and we start down a path, and then sometimes you find out, oh, now I've got to take all these classes or other things because things didn't pivot. So that's really, really helpful to know. Um, so as you, because with IT is kind of like everywhere. You obviously work for a university, but I know IT is in healthcare, it's
Mm-hmm.
in business, finance. How do you take the job that you do working with databases at a university? How would that look any different in another industry, or would it not look any different?
Yeah. So when you're working in particular with databases, a lot of it is going to look exactly the same no matter where you go. So
Mhm.
between database schema design and how to store it properly and maintaining it, that's all going to look pretty much the same no matter where you go. It's like knowing databases, if I can equate it to knowing Microsoft Word. You can write a
Okay.
paper for this subject or write a paper for that subject. It's all going to kind of be the same, at least operationally. So once you have that under your belt, you can pretty much go anywhere and have it be useful. Now, what I do is much above databases. Databases is just one side of it because I'm what's called a full stack developer. So I do databases and the middleware, which is putting things on a server, pulling things out from a database and sending it back to your computer, and then designing the front end as well. So taking that data that comes from the middleware and converting it into something that's visually pleasing and easy to read,
Oh,
and onto a chart or graph or whatever you want. So
yeah, making
um,
it nice for the rest of us that don't understand to understand.
yeah.
That's really great. So David, what is a day in the life of David Petitfor as the senior research programmer? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Like when does your
So
day start? When does your day end? And what do you do during that day?
yeah, and that's going to change depending on where you're at. Obviously, different companies
Mhm.
will have different requirements. um, at the Center for Research Computing at Notre Dame, we've deployed something called Scrum, or an agile methodology. And what that means in a nutshell is you have you set yourself up for a goal, and that goal will either be a day-to-day goal, or it'll be like in every 2 weeks. These are the things I want to get done within 2 weeks.
Mm,
And so day to day, your team, my team, will have what we call a stand-up, and it's a 15-minute meeting at the start of the day where we go over what we got done yesterday, what we plan on getting done today, and any roadblocks that we have. Like, I want to get this done, but I need this information from someone else. And so we can have that communication. We all know what each of us is working on. And that's also a good way to keep ourselves accountable, right? Because
mhm.
if I say I'm going to get this done today, and then tomorrow people ask, well, what did you do yesterday? I'm like, well, I didn't do what it was I said I wanted to do. So it's like, okay, what was I doing? Um, so that really helps to where managers don't need to micromanage and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, a day to day really is sitting down, looking at a list of stories. So we've got an end goal of, hey, we want a website that can do this. And so we have someone on our team called a product owner, and they will take that and break that down into smaller pieces, and then take those and break them down into even smaller pieces to where we can almost get a step-by-step of what needs to be done in order for this to be accomplished. And then as a developer, I can get on and look at each of those steps and say, yeah, I can do this, this, and this. And then the ones that I can't do, maybe another teammate can pick up. And so there's that open communication. And then you just sit down and start programming away until it's all working.
Wow. What I hear is a lot of teamwork,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of communication, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of organization. So, what other skills would you say in order to do the job that you do, or a job in programming, database, like we talked about, IT? What other kind of skills do you need?
Yeah. So one of the really important things to remember is, and we've already mentioned this before, things don't always go as planned.
Yeah.
And so I'll start my day off thinking, hey, I only have to do tasks A and B today. And all of a sudden tasks M through Z come in, and they're super urgent and I need to get them fixed like right away. So being flexible and keeping a cool head are some really important
Mm.
things, because there might be a bug in your software to where the entire website is down and not working. And so to stay calm and do this firefighting, as we call it, and try to get it resolved as quickly and swiftly as possible without breaking other code too. That's the that's the other
Yeah.
key, because you don't want to push an update to fix one bug only to introduce 10 more, because then you're starting to work backwards, and that has happened.
Oh my goodness.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
that would
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah, it's happened before, and it can be very frustrating. But also, as you said, the teamwork really comes into play with this too. Where if I need help fighting some of these fires, I can call on certain team members and be like, hey, I'm having a hard time. Or even just recognizing when you get exhausted, and realizing like, okay, I'm starting to cause more problems than I'm fixing. Maybe I need to step away for 10 minutes or for half an hour, just to clear my head and take a breather, and then come back feeling refreshed and ready to go.
That's a really important point, because looking at a screen, I'm sure all the time at all the data that you're looking at sometimes probably starts to blur, and
Mhm.
recognizing that, and pulling away, and having a strong team behind you. What would you say are some of the toughest things about your job?
Yeah, it's definitely the firefighting.
Yeah.
It's definitely that needing to be flexible, and knowing that there could be an entire country that's waiting on this website to be working because they're starting their day. That's one of the things that we've struggled with over the past couple of years on this one project, where we're tracking the spread of malaria in third world countries,
Oh, wow.
and one of those countries is Kenya. And Kenya is ahead of us by 8 hours if we're not in daylight savings time. So when I'm getting ready to go to bed at night, Sunday night, they're getting things ready to start their Monday. And so there's been many times where someone will come in or send us an email saying, hey, this page is not working right. We need this working like right away, because we're trying to get ready to send people out into the field. And it's like, oh boy. Okay, let me hop on real quick and see if I can get that working. So it's a combination of being that, flexible, and having that foresight of knowing when certain features are going to be needed, and making sure that they're good to go for when they are needed.
Yeah, like you said, that would be a challenge, working with different time zones and
Mhm.
and different schedules. Absolutely. So, and I can only assume that, because at the rate that technology changes, you know, for you working in a field that deals with technology,
Mhm.
what are some of the challenges with that, and how do you see that changing in your field going forward?
Yeah, there's definitely an evolution in how things are designed and built. We're constantly dealing with old projects that are still being used, but suddenly the software that we developed them on is no longer supported. And so there's that challenge of, well, we need to update the software that it's running on to be able to work and be patched and supported. But that takes time, right? And so you then have to ask the client, do you have this much money to to pay us to upgrade it, or what do you want to do? But beyond just routine updates like that, there's the internet, and especially web, is still constantly being changed and evolving, and what is being used and how it's separated, where you need to separate your database from your middleware and your front end. So you could be using three different technology stacks, where you've got Postgres for your database and you're using maybe Django as your middleware, but then you're using Vue or Nuxt as or React even, as your front end. And so those are three totally different paradigms that you need to keep training in, that you have to keep learning and evolving with them as they're coming up and new standards are being pushed out. And that's one great thing about working at Notre Dame, is we do encourage you to keep training and keep relearning. And it's not something that you're not just using one program or developing on one project for your entire career. With the research projects that come into our center, it's something new. Even if they are every 5 years, some of them are only like a 3-month project. And so you have this constant cycle of refreshness that you can keep applying your same technical skills on, but it never really gets old. So
Yeah, I love that it's ever evolving. Somebody that might like something that is changing, and you have to constantly keep refreshing yourself. I think that, that's important. I'm so glad you brought that to light, is that you're never going to stop learning.
right.
And really, in any career that you're going to go into, you're never going to stop
Yeah,
learning.
and I would encourage you to find a career to where you're not going to stop learning.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't necessarily, and maybe you do, but I personally would not want to work for a company that says you're going to learn .NET version 5.0 and that's all you're ever going to learn for the next 40 years. Like,
right.
that's going to be so dry.
Yeah. Well, and I think, what we've learned, especially in today's workforce, is that there are many jobs out there that haven't been created yet. And some of them blur lines,
Mm-hmm.
what used to be maybe in this bucket and this bucket, now those two buckets are pushed together. So the more that you can diversify and become really well versed in a variety of things, the better it's going to be for you
Yeah.
moving forward into the workforce. So
Yep.
I appreciate that. Um, so, to finish off our time with you, and David, this has really been so insightful, and I've learned a lot of lingo that I didn't know, and now I'm going to, be able to impress people and say, hey, I know stuff about IT now, but more importantly, I know a little bit more about the career and the steps, if I was interested in that, of how to get there. So I do appreciate that. So I will keep you on after we stop recording, because I just to finish some things up, but kind of the last question for you today. Um, if you had a nugget of advice to give to a middle school or high school student that's interested in IT or something in that vein, what would you say to them?
I would say find something about IT that you're passionate about, and that you enjoy. Because if you enjoy, let's say you enjoy front end web development, and you really like making things look good. If you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to go far with it, because it's going to be easy to stay motivated. And or likewise, if you enjoy getting data to fit together, or more of a back end kind of a thing, then stick with that and keep exploring. But yeah, absolutely, never stop learning. Never say, you know what, this is all that I need to know, because that's never going to be the case.
Absolutely. Well, I think that is great advice. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today with our guest, David Pettifor. I really learned a lot. I hope everybody did as well. For those of you that attending in the next 24 to 48 hours, you're going to receive an email asking for some feedback, not only on this webinar, but our series. Please fill that out. That helps us to know that we're kind of hitting the topic areas and also that this is valuable to you. So thank you for everybody joining and hope to see you at the next Future Focus in the new year.